To the latest episode of the 5 Reasons Podcast. I'm Ethan Skolnick here, as always, with Chris Winningham. Now that you've found us, make sure you hit the subscribe or follow button on your favorite podcast provider. That way you'll get all of our old episodes as well as all of our new episodes as soon as they post. One thing to look for on our feed this week is that I'll be heading to NBA All-Star Weekend. I'll be meeting a couple of my colleagues from Miami Heat Beat, Greg Sylvander, you know him as Lefty Leif, and also Nikias Duncan, who wrote a great piece about the Heat that aired on heatbeatmiami.com yesterday. So the three of us will be up there. Actually, we have more people going from our outlet than all of the other outlets in South Florida combined. But somebody who will be going is Shandell Richardson from The Athletic. He never misses an All-Star game, mostly because of the night activities. But he's now a colleague of our next guest, Andre Fernandez. You probably remember him over the past couple of decades with the Miami Herald. He left for The Athletic. What is it, about a month ago now, Andre, that you've been at The Athletic? Maybe a little bit longer?
No, since last summer, since Labor Day. Labor Day, I picked it up there.
My God, man, Ethan, these are your friends. You're not tracking the progress of your boy Andre Fernandez. Come on.
Well, no, it's just.
Flies.
I mean, when you're churning out 3 podcasts a week, you just, when you're trying to get Giancarlo Navas to do something, it's time goes very quickly. So yes, Andre's been there now for, I guess, 5 or 6 months with Athletic Miami. You can follow him at Fernandez Andre on Twitter. And we're going to talk Marlins today. We have not done this for a very long time. We did an episode that actually Chris missed, which was about the Marlins marketing strategy, and actually Andre was a part of that. We had our guys from Seco Razones and also Alphonse Sidney from Light Skinned Opinions and Miami Heat Beat joined us for that one. But we haven't really talked baseball, just pure baseball, in a while. And today Derek Jeter spoke to the media. We've got pitchers and catchers reporting on Wednesday. Full squad workout, a first official full squad workout is next Monday. I'll be heading up with a cast of thousands later in the month. So we wanted to get Andre on just to talk Marlins and sort of where they are in their process. So let's start with Jeter today, Andre. What struck you about what he said?
Well, aside from the fact that you had drills and jackhammers going on in the background with the construction going on in Marlins Park, when I could hear his voice sometimes, he still sounds, like a guy who's hopeful that this process is working, let's say, but obviously someone that wishes it was further along than it is. But the reality is you trade the guys that they've traded, and you're banking a lot of it on the development staff there, the Marlins, turning these assets into, productive players, successful players in the future. And right now, to me, there's still a wide range of where this could go. There's a lot of guys that have upside, but there's a lot of guys that still have a lot of question marks. And some of them, it's maybe an injury case, like, the Sixto Sanchez pitcher that they just picked up from the Phillies for Realmuto. Guy has been compared to Luis Severino, even Pedro Martinez by some scouts. But he had an elbow problem last year. Kid can throw over 100 miles an hour. I mean, you see pitchers that can throw that hard. Sometimes it's risky. They're prone to potential injuries there. So using just him as one example, there's a lot of guys that we still don't know how good they're going to turn out. Of course, Jeter and everybody else in the front office is going to give you the optimistic view, and they're going to say, we're taking steps in the right direction, et cetera. And that's fine, but it remains to be seen. We're still only in year 2, and I think there's a lot of growing pains still on this team, but it's going to be a critical year to kind of see where a lot of guys are at, to see if they are making progress. I'm sure we'll talk about more specifically soon, but to give you examples like the Lewis Brinsons, who had a bad year last year as a rookie, can he, flip things around this year and start to progress, start to show some of the hope, that some of the talent that they felt like they got? Sandy Alcantara on the mound, has a lot of potential, but, he's had some command issues, walked a lot of guys. We're going to start to see if these guys, it could be a lot like after they dismantled the 97 team back in the day, where you started to see the foundation of what came later, or if things don't happen that way and guys regress, then you can kind of start to say, okay, this is a little bit worrisome, because by now they should be a little further along than they are.
Now, the headline today that most seem to have picked up on was the zero patience line, which was, I have no patience, I have zero patience, I've been preaching it, I don't have it. So do you think there's at any point where the Marlins deviate from this plan? Because to me, I'm looking at their salary sheet, and I actually think it'll probably end up looking worse from that standpoint, because they're probably gonna you know, they want to get rid of Starlin Castro. They would like to get rid of Wei and Chen, even though they probably won't. They'll probably try and offload Martin Prado as well. I mean, that might take their salary down to $35 million. I mean, it can get a lot lower. So, I mean, beyond ignoring, which is certainly one way that Marlins fans have dealt with the Marlins over a long time, what do you think the fans are going to be latching onto this year? And do you think they'll have that patience?
Well, that's really the part that remains to be seen, because you're right. I think his patience may be wearing thin a little bit in those terms. But like you said, there's about $46 million, I think, between three players. The ones you said, Chen, Starling, and Prado. And we know Prado's in his last year. So is Starling, but Chen still has two more, and he's obviously the most expensive one. You know, Starling could be an attractive piece they could trade during the season if he has a good first half, maybe by the trade deadline. And his money he'll be a little cheaper by the midway point of the season too. The other two, barring something really drastic, they're not that attractive to other teams, because Chen has only been good at Marlins Park. You know, you take him out of there, then what is he? Is he the road pitcher that's atrocious when he pitches outside of Miami? For all we know, it could be. And then with Prado, we know the quality guy that he is. We know he's a decent bat still at his age, but he can't stay on the field. He's been on the DL more than he's been on the field the last 2 years. So that's the problem there. So, you know, in terms of money, it was expected to be maybe around the $100 million, the payroll. Then some reports said maybe 80. You know, it probably will shrink before it grows in terms of by the end of this season, maybe going into next season. There's other factors too. They're waiting on potentially a new TV deal come 2020. They're looking for naming rights down the road on the stadium, stuff that's going to generate more revenue. They've invested a lot in Marlins Park this year. There's going to be all sorts of, you know, new items, you know, the standing room only sections, you name it. So a lot of things that in theory will generate more, even if the attendance doesn't pick up by that much, which it probably won't. So the telling part's going to be when they get to that point, do they start adding pieces through free agency, significant pieces that can complement maybe some of the guys that do pan out in terms of the young players that they're acquiring through the draft and through the trades that they just made.
Andre, we talk a lot about Jeter because he's Jeter, and it's the easy face to go to. I don't feel like we talk about Bruce Sherman enough. It's all about Jeter, and he's got this tiny piece of what they're doing. Yeah. It's not as tiny as like what Serena and Venus had of the Dolphins, but it's not huge. And I know he's drawing a salary. He's been much more, I would say, active and visible than even I expected. I mean, he's been out there. He's been in the community. I mean, he's made himself a part of this community, which I give him credit for, because a lot of the guys who've come down here who've been successful, particularly guys who've been successful like in places like New York, like a Bill Parcells, like they just didn't care. They didn't go out in the community. I mean, Jeter to me has been following more of the Riley model, I think, than anybody else, other than the guy that Chris is going to be covering, which is Beckham. I think there are some similarities there, but we don't talk much about Bruce Sherman. Like, what do you think he's committed to spend long term? What kind of money and resources does he have? Because I feel like if they don't end up spending, then everybody's just going to blame Jeter for it, and he's not really the one holding the purse strings.
Right, and that's true, and that's definitely on point. I mean, the thing with Sherman is, he just hasn't really, it almost seems a little like, I don't want to say reclusive because he's at the ballpark, but we just really haven't really gotten to know him much. Like he's spoken briefly at certain events here and there, you know, every once in a while, but I feel like we don't know enough about him yet. And yeah, he has, I don't know how deep pockets, but he does have deep pockets to spend, and he's, in the beginning, when he bought the team, he made it sound like this was an investment he wanted to make, not just for himself, but for his family. Something like the Marlins can be, you know, something that his family can not just own the team, but take pride in and invest in for years to come. So if that's to be believed, it would be a positive thing, because you would expect that he'd care to make this a winning franchise. He always strikes me as a big baseball fan too. Like he's always talking about it even like when we're not interviewing him, we're just maybe having a quick chat the few times that we had. Like he seems like someone that's really been a baseball fan too for a long time. So in that sense, it would be encouraging to believe that, considering the past of this team and previous, you know, groups that have owned it and things like to that nature. But I think it's still too early to tell. I mean, that's sort of something that hopefully he lends himself to kind of be, you know, to get to know him a little bit more this season and in years to come. But funny you mentioned Jeter about being visible. he said another thing he said today was this year he plans to be around the clubhouse more. He plans to be even more visible, even to his own team and to his own roster than he was last year.
I wanted to ask you about, in general, this idea. So now the Marlins' full teardown is complete. They've traded away most every valuable player, major league player that they had to try and reset this roster. So, I think this is a fascinating idea, and really the first time we've really seen it implemented on a long-term basis in South Florida. So, I guess my first question is, like, independent of who they've gotten and what do they have, do you think that this is a good strategy and one that fans should be on board with?
I mean, it's a strategy you see more and more nowadays in baseball when you're a team that isn't putting together the payroll, let's say, of the upper echelon in baseball, like, the Yankees and the Red Sox, the Dodgers, and that sort of thing. You start to see this type of formula, and if executed correctly, it can work. I mean, that's how the Cubs started to build. That's how the Astros definitely started to build in recent years to the championship team that they became. The Braves are getting there now. They took the first big step this past season. But the one critique has been, did they get enough for all these players? And that really, right now, it doesn't look as good for them because none of the guys that they received in return have really done anything yet. Sandy Alcantara, Jorge Guzman, guys that came in, they're all unknowns unless you're like hardcore baseball fans that know. And it's all just guys that you read scouting reports about and say, oh, this guy can throw 100. They've only, for the most part, they've only done it in the minors. The only piece of this, of all these big trades they had that has major league experience is Starlin Castro. And he's a guy that may not even be here the entire season because it may be more worth it to them to trade him for more, another prospect, international money, whatever. So it's at a point right now where it's very easy to look at and say, they blew these trades. They didn't get enough because their farm system, yes, it's better, but it's not top 10 in baseball right now. It's not. They haven't landed, the obvious Ronald Acuna type player that you look at and say, wow, I know that guy's going to be there at the point when the window for serious contention starts. They have a lot of guys that could get there, but we don't know yet. And I think that's where this year starts to kind of tell a little bit more, both at the major league level and the minor league level, as to what they really got in return. You can't put it as, is it better than Stanton? Is it better than Yelich? Those guys, what they're doing right now, they're both MVPs. They traded 5 All-Stars. It's not a fair scale to compare. It's obviously lopsided in the other team's favor. So I think you have to look at it as, how many of these guys are going to end up being the fundamental pieces of a future contending team? And that's why it looks a lot like it did maybe, after the initial teardown before they built the team in 2003. We're sort of at the baby step stages of this. And in the next year or two is when you're going to get closer to it.
Yeah, and that's the point that I wanted to make, too, because I was a little bit surprised when you went through some of the top 100 lists, whether it was Baseball America or some of the others, and you couldn't find a Marlin prospect on there. I guess Victor Mesa was, 99th on one of them? One of the other...
Yeah, well, now he's rated 60th by some, but even 60, you're still not in the top 50 or,
Right. Well, that means, if you've got 30 franchises, you're talking about, he's not considered. The Marlins don't have anybody who's considered to be what would be a top 2, prospect, I guess, if you just went around the league in terms of, what should be one of your top 2 prospects. It's kind of what I say about the Heat all the time. It's like, okay, I like Justice Winslow. How many teams in the league would he be the best player on? And
right.
You get, or Josh Richardson or Goran Dragic, and you're pretty much going to get to none. And so, or maybe a couple. So I guess that's my concern about this is they got sort of one bite at the apple here, or I should say 5 bites, right? Because we talk about the 3 outfielders, Realmuto, and
Stanton.
Gordon.
Yeah, Stanton was kind of to get out of that enormous contract. So that one, at least, I can almost give him a pass for that one, but the rest of them.
Yeah, the other 4, and look, and Gordon, I understood to some degree, but Yelich, it seems to me like they gave away Yelich because he wasn't a good clubhouse guy. Mish has, tried to give Michael Hill the out on that when he had him on the podcast. It is what it is. You didn't have to be around the Marlins to know that Christian Yelich wasn't happy and probably might poison some of the other guys in the room. But you also didn't have to be a baseball scout to know that this was a 5-tool player who was on the verge of breaking out. So I guess my frustration with it is not the strategy. I don't have a problem with the strategy. If you weren't if you weren't winning with what you had, if you didn't have the payroll to add, two, they needed more than two. They needed 3 or 4, A-level arms basically. So I totally get that, but my concern is that particularly the 4. I mean, and it looks like they might have done better for Stanton than we thought, but the other 4, you have to get a couple of elite guys there, and maybe it's maybe it's Monte Harrison, maybe it's maybe Brinson has a better year, but I guess that would be my issue with it. If you're going to go full tank and dump not like Martin Prados, okay, but like
JT Realmuto, MVP caliber players,
right? I mean, you're
right.
Right.
That's
my concern.
That's where I agree. I agree with you. I don't have a problem with the strategy itself. It's the execution of it, and that's where I think right now it doesn't look good for them as up to this point because of that. Because there's not there is there talent, yes, but is it talent that convinces you? They're not there. It's talent that you have to wait and see if it even gets close to that. And like you said, to me, the probably the better of all of them might have been this most recent one, assuming that the kid that Sixto Sanchez pans out and doesn't, and he's not hurt all the time. That to me was the best one because and not only him, but if Jorge Alfaro has question marks, his mechanics aren't great, he strikes out a lot, but if they fix him, he's still young enough that he could fix that, and they've got several years where he can be under contract. That's a perfect bridge till the only other catching prospect they have comes along, or maybe another guy they draft, or whatever. It gives them some options. But before that, these trades in between, it's all predicated on, can we turn these guys into something good? And then, you don't know if they're going to be even half of what some of these guys that they gave away are going to be, or even close. It's a lot of wait and see and a lot of, speculation.
We'll get back to today's episode of the 5 Reasons podcast in a second. But first, I want to tell you about one of our great sponsors, and that is Doral Toyota. Doral Toyota, where you can find all your favorite Toyota models, whether you're looking for a new, used, or certified pre-owned vehicle. Doral Toyota is located at 9775 Northwest 12th Street, just a few blocks from International and Dolphin Malls. I've been there before. It is a fantastic location. Experience the Doral difference, which means 4 years complimentary maintenance and roadside assistance on all new vehicles. In-house financing is available for credit-related issues. If you mention 5 Reasons when you call 305-680-1129 or come in the dealership, you will work with a dedicated manager, not a salesman. Unlike other dealers, Doral Toyota prides itself on an honest and transparent buying process. That's Doral Toyota, DoralToyota.com, or stop in at 9775 Northwest 12th Street. Vamos, let's go, Doral Toyota. So you look at, I think the Houston Astros are another team that, and you mentioned them earlier as the tanking team that ended up working out. They had 3 seasons of 100 losses or more, 106, 107, and 111, then a 4th season under 500 before making the playoffs in their 5th season and winning the World Series in their 7th season of their full-scale build. So I guess my question would be, do you think, if presuming this has a pattern of success at any point, do you think it'll be similar 3-4 years of under 500 and at times losing 100 games level baseball? And if so, I mean, this market already is not particularly behind its baseball team. Do you think that the Marlins can survive as a business, can generate enough of a TV deal, can lay enough infrastructure so that if and when they do get good, they're an economically viable franchise?
Well, that's the big challenge right there. It's a pretty hard it's definitely a very hard ask of the community here to if you truly are a Marlins fan, to endure that after years. Some are probably just used to it at this point, but others are tired of it and they don't want to see that anymore. Look, are they saying all the right things? Are they trying a lot of efforts off the field? Great. But the baseball product is what ultimately is what matters. And like you said, I mean, it could definitely be that. I mean, this season definitely looks like it's headed to a similar outcome to last year. In fact, without JT Realmuto, they're depending on, let's say, a Brian Anderson not having a regression. They're depending on him to be pretty much at least the same player he was last year. They're depending on Brinson to get better. They're depending on Sandy to get better. Pablo Lopez, Trevor Richards, the arms that they have in their rotation. Their bullpen has to get better than the nightmare that it was in the second half. A lot of things have to improve, because if it doesn't, they brought in a couple veterans, and that's nice. It's great to have good clubhouse guys like Curtis Granderson, Neil Walker in your clubhouse for the intangibles and all that. But they're not going to light the world on fire on the field that you would think, to the point where they're going to carry a team. And I guess what I'm trying to say is you gave away a lot of big bats, even guys that were here last year, where if injuries surface or some of these guys, don't play well, the record could look even worse than 63 and 98. And that doesn't mean necessarily that in the grand scheme of things, the plan isn't progressing, trending in the right direction, in terms of development, but it could get worse before it gets better in terms of the short term on the field right now. And then, like I said, that has an effect, obviously, on attendance and several other things. So it's gonna be interesting to see how much they can move along, in spite of that for the next couple of years. Because to me, at 2021, 2022, that's when, if everything continues to progress, that's when I could see it happening. Because a lot of the guys that they've brought in the last couple of years, you still need to go through the process in the minors. Then they have to get to the majors, and it's not just getting to the majors. It's getting playing time. It's adjusting. There's a lot of levels to this.
Yeah, and that's what we saw with Lewis Brinson last year, which is, he got the opportunity in the first half of the season, and it was too much for him. And we see a lot of guys that happens in the first year. That's pretty common. Look at A-Rod's numbers his first year in the major leagues. It's
right.
There's an adjustment period, and so this is going to be a long, long, long process. Again, it doesn't mean that I disagree with the process, but they're in this for the next 3 to 4 years. Let's go around the diamond a little bit, just see where they are at each position coming into spring training. So Realmuto's gone. What's it going to look like at catcher?
Jorge Alfaro is the man for them. Right now, they bring this kid in. Like I said before, they have 5 years of team control with him. The upside is he's got one of the best arms behind the plate in baseball. Last year, like his pop time to second, where you measure how fast he can get guys out, was comparable to JT. JT's was, I believe, like 1.90 seconds, and Alfaro, you're talking like 194. It's very close. It was ranked among the top catchers in the league. Mechanically, though, his defense needs some work. He's still kind of raw there. He made some errors. I think he made like 11 errors behind the plate, which sounds like a lot, but it was not great. So you're looking at a guy who you hope doesn't turn into, let's say, to use an example, like a Gary Sanchez, where he has the big power bat, but he's terrible defensively behind the plate. You hope that he fine-tunes both areas, and he strikes out a lot, or he did last year. But this kid has only really had like one full season in the majors. So similar to Brinson, this is a telling year. Can he make adjustments? Can their coaches do that? So behind the plate, I'd say he's the starter. Backups, Chad Wallach's there, but he wasn't very good last year. He's the only guy on the 40-man. But I could see them. I could see Brian Holiday, who was brought back as a non-roster invitee, becoming the backup catcher. He did a pretty decent. He didn't hit a lot, but he did a pretty decent job defensively for them last year.
All right, let's look at the infield then, and again, I know some of this is dependent on a couple of guys who could get traded, but assuming Starlin Castro is going to be at second and probably hitting somewhere in the middle of the order, which, again, on a good team, he's a seventh, place hitter. Probably, but
right.
On this team, he's going to be middle of the order. What do they look like at the 4 spots?
First base. They brought in Neil Walker, who can pretty much play most of the spots in the infield except shortstop. But it sounds like they're going to use him at first, and then they're going to give Peter O'Brien a chance. O'Brien, again, guy that really hasn't been able to stick it in the majors for about 7 years now. But last year, the Marlins get him into their minor league system midway through the year, and he has a pretty good September. Gives him some hope. He's a power bat. They're thinking probably potentially a platoon there at first base. Going into the season, let's see how that works out. Second base for now is Starlin's job until they were to move him, or if he rides out the year and they let him go after that, because they're waiting on Isan Diaz, one of the guys that they got in the Yelich trade, to emerge. He's already made it up to the AAA level. I don't think he starts the season in the majors. I think they give him a little more time in AAA to keep working on things, and then maybe he's a call-up midway through the season if he's ready, and then at that point, that gives them an option if they want to trade Castro. Then you go to shortstop, and it's between JT Riddle and Miguel Rojas. I'm not sure how they're committed to having one guy full-time there yet. I guess it's going to depend on what they see in the spring, but both guys could play the position if need be. And then at third, the interesting thing that came out of FanFest was that they want to move Brian Anderson back there and have Prado sort of more in a utility role, assuming he's healthy. So that's going to be interesting to see, because we saw Anderson hit really well last year for a rookie. He was pretty durable, but I think defensively he made he made some errors at third base. wasn't as sharp as he was in the outfield. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Do they stick to that plan, leave him there? Or do they move him to right field where he was last year, especially because in the outfield, in the short term, they don't have a lot of quality options. So to me, it was kind of surprising that they wouldn't want to have him there for now. But they envision him as a third baseman long term, and I think they want to commit to that early.
So who's so you mentioned who's the second baseman long term. Who's the shortstop long term in this system?
In the system now, well, there's several guys, but I think the guy that's most interesting to watch, and the thing is, there's two guys actually, and they're still pretty far away in terms of development. But Cyrus Johnson, who is the cousin of Jimmy Rollins, the one that they drafted last year, he's shown a lot of potential, like having the tools to play the position. Strong defender, his bat could come along. The other kid I like a lot is Jose Devers. I think he's the one. He came over in the Stanton deal, and he's got the thing with him is like he's very skinny right now. I think his body needs to continue to develop. He's still really young. He'll get a taste probably of playing at Jupiter. If he progresses, maybe even they'll give him a shot at Jacksonville by the end of the season, which is in Double A. But he's still a couple of years away. Those are the two guys I think they're banking on the most, unless Riddle really blows them away this season. But I think it's more likely you'll see those two that I mentioned before eventually getting that spot.
All right, and let's final thing, and then I'll let Chris get to some of the pitchers here. The outfield, it's not Stanton, Ozuna, and Yelich anymore. You mentioned Anderson's going to be at third. Prado's going to be a utility guy. They bring in Granderson. I don't know what Curtis has left. I mean, he's always been one of my favorite guys to watch, actually, and I know he's a really good clubhouse guy. But is he going to get a starting spot out there? And is Brinson guaranteed a starting spot after what happened last year?
I don't think he's guaranteed a starting spot, but I think he's the closest thing you can say to the guaranteed starter in the outfield right now. Barring a catastrophe in spring training, I think he's got it going in, and then it's going to be up to him to keep the spot, depending if he hits better all the way around and even plays defensively better than he did last year. But I think Granderson will end up being the left fielder, and I think it's because of the lack of short-term options right now. Not to say Granderson can't give him anything at all. I mean, I think he's not an everyday outfielder anymore, ideally, but he still can come in off the bench and still can make a few starts here and there. He did it last year for the Brewers, played in over 100 games still. I mean, I think he starts the year there, and then if they see progress from some of their prospects, maybe they make a switch of some sort. I think a part of it too is because they were disappointed with the way Magneuris Sierra turned out last year in his first major league action. I mean, the kid didn't hit the ball at all. He wasn't getting on base. Blazing speed if he can actually get on base. But I think they decided that he needs a lot of work still to improve that. And I think for now, Granderson ends up in left, Brinson in center. If they're not going to go with Anderson in right field, then that's another spot where there's a few guys competing for it. Maybe you see Granderson in right, and they put Austin Dean in left for the time being. Maybe this kid, there's another one, Rosel Herrera, that they claimed off waivers from the Royals. Decent guy, looks like almost like a productive utility type that they could put there for now until other guys, come along and get better. But yeah, I mean, the outfield looks like it's so barren right now that I'm surprised that they would already say Anderson is at third.
All right, so run through for us 1 through 5 the starting rotation on opening day.
Well, I think they're gonna err on the side of experience to start the year, and that's mainly putting opening day starter will probably again come down to either Urena or Dan Straley, just because they're the most experienced guys. With Urena, their hope is they haven't seen a good full year from him. They saw a great September, but a lot of inconsistency before that. Maybe this is the year that he finally figures it out. They're hoping that. Straley's a veteran that he's dependable. Is he close to being a top end guy? Probably not, but he's a 4 or 5 that for now on this team you could put as a steady guy in there. Chen will be somewhere in that 2 or 3 mix, for the time being. You wish you could only pitch him at Marlins Park, but they're going to have to, I guess, unless they figure something out. And then from there, Sandy Alcantara, this is going to be the first chance to pitch for a full season. And the other one, only because he doesn't have injury issues coming off last season, is Trevor Richards. I mean, this kid has a nasty changeup that if the other pitchers come along, he had a decent start last year, got I don't remember the exact number, but it was 25 starts. So he's another one that has a full season of experience. So to me, that's the starting 5. But Pablo Lopez and Caleb Smith are going to be very close. They both have some injuries they were recovering from. They're fully healthy now, it sounds like. But maybe the Marlins ease them into that role just to see, where they're at by late March or April. But I could see them getting in the rotation later on.
So in terms of the bullpen, where do you think they go for closer? I mean, not that particularly matters when you're going to win the amount of games the Marlins are going to win, but do you think there will be some arms that emerge out of this bullpen?
Well, funny you say that, though, because they probably could have had somewhere between 8 to 10 more wins last year had they not kept blowing games left and right, especially after Barraclough started pitching worse. So, I mean, you would like to see improvement there, no doubt, since they have some players that you could see them keeping for years to come, like a Drew Steckenrider. Adam Conley, to me, found a good role for him. You know, as a starter, he was very inconsistent. As maybe like a seventh or eighth inning setup guy, I think he's got a good role on this team. Aaron Guerrero is the other one that can throw over 100, but his control needs to improve if they're going to put him in a high leverage role the way they hope they can. Maybe also in that seventh, eighth inning sort of thing. My favorite is Steckenrider. I think he's going to end up being the guy that they tap as the closer when it's all said and done going into the season. And I think with those three, if they're consistent, it's not that bad when they, like you said, when they actually have opportunity to nail down a lead late in the game. I think it's a decent combo that will hope that they hope to see more progression from. Beyond that, kind of there's a few arms in there that they may throw in as middle relievers. There's also some guys that like the ones I said before, Smith and Lopez. If they're not in the rotation, you could see them maybe in some sort of long relief roles for the time being until spots open up.
We'll get back to the episode here in a second, but want to tell you about something that's going on in the 5 Reasons Sports Network this week. It is Dwayne Wade's last All-Star game. We're excited about this. In his 16th season, we're making it a Wade weekend. So it wasn't enough to just cover with one person up in Charlotte and send my butt up there, but we're also going to have Nikias Duncan. You know him as at Nikias NBA. He's our premier NBA analyst on the network. And also Lefty Leif. That's Greg Sylvander. You can follow him on Twitter too, at Lefty_LEIF. So the three of us are going to be up there for all of All-Star Weekend from Thursday night through Monday. Here's how you follow us. We're going to do a podcast on the 5 Reasons flagship feed and also on Miami Heat Beat. So type Miami Heat Beat into your favorite podcast provider. We're also going to provide some interviews with other NBA analysts, media people, former players, current players, anybody we can find up there in Charlotte. And also check out our Instagram feeds, because that's where you can find all of the video that we'll be posting. Everything Dwayne does, we will be covering it. So follow us at 5 Reasons Sports. That's the number 5 Reasons Sports, and also at MIA Heat Beat, and also the same handles on Twitter.
And one more from me. I just wanted to ask let's call it 2 guys that will be coming up mid-season from the minor leagues that you're most looking forward to seeing.
Well, I'm curious about Isan Diaz, because a lot's been internally within the organization. They like him a lot. You know, externally, not a lot's expected because he's one of the guys that they think wasn't enough value to get back for Yelich. But this guy, I think, is very close to potentially being their starting second baseman. So he's another one that's had a lot of high swing and miss rate in the past, which, let's see how he does when he finally gets to the majors. Every time he's elevated a level, he's had a little bit of trouble adjusting, but he has been able to adjust. So ideally, to me, you need to get this guy in the majors this year. It's obviously another throwaway year in terms of wins and losses. Let him take his first hacks this year and work that out of his system, and then have him ready to go as your starting opening day guy next year. So that's one for sure. Another one, I know a lot of people talk about Victor Mesa, but I think he still needs maybe a full year in the minors before he gets to that point, just to get adjusted to baseball, minor league baseball, and he hasn't played in a while. Organized baseball, he hasn't played in a while, even in Cuba. So I think that's going to take a little time. Monte Harrison is the other one, just like Isan. Do we see him by September this year? I think it's a lot's going to depend on whether the adjustments he made in the Arizona Fall League really pan out. Also if he can get his power stroke back, because he started making more contact. And he started hitting a little more in the Fall League, but his power numbers pretty much disappeared. And that changes things, because they brought this guy in not just to be, he's a 5-tool potential talent, or at least that was the appeal of him when they traded for him. They didn't want a singles hitter when they got this guy. They wanted a guy that had some pop in addition to his tools defensively and his speed. So if the adjustments he made allow for that power to come back and to develop, whatever time frame it takes for him to get to that point again will dictate how soon they bring him up. So to me, those are 2 for sure.
All right, last one here for Andre Fernandez. You can catch his work at The Athletic Miami. Make sure to pay for that subscription. There are a lot of subscriptions out there. This one is actually worth it, because not only do you get the 6 local guys here, but you additionally get the rest of their network as well, which means if you like baseball, you get Kenny Rosenthal and Jason Stark and a whole bunch of others. But certainly we encourage you to follow Andre's work. So I guess as you're giving me the total picture here, I mean, we're looking at like 58 and I don't know, 58, 104 off the top of my head. I mean,
it was 63 last year. It was 63 last year. So, I mean, yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
is Realmuto worth 5 wins? Probably, right?
Probably. Yeah.
Yeah, wasn't that was his WAR pretty much on the nose, wasn't it? Like 4 or 5 wins, something like that.
Right, and you're going to trade Castro at some point, and not that you've gotten a lot of use out of him lately, but you're probably going to trade Prado, and so, yeah, I mean, you're looking at sort of high 50s, low 60s. I guess again, it's not really about this year. To me, it's about whether or not you're bringing in the right prospects to build with, and I guess if you could summarize what the Jeter Hill philosophy is as far as the type of player they're trying to bring in, because is this a big analytics organization? Is this what is this going to look like? Because with certain other organizations, like what a Theo Epstein organization is like at this point, like
right.
What is this like? I mean, is Jeter just want guys who are going to jump into the stands and flip the ball to home plate? I mean, what is he looking for? Because I don't, in baseball, to me, it's a little harder to kind of figure that out sometimes than, I mean, Chris and I do more NBA than we do anything else. And in the NBA,
right.
like, I know what a Pat Riley player looks like, kind of. I sort of know, what a Greg Popovich player looks like. I don't know what a Derek Jeter player looks like. Describe him if you can.
Well, that's the interesting part, is that they have a formula of the type of guy they've been looking for, and I guess the best way to put it, they want the guys, those toolsy players that are athletic, that not just can hit but can run, can field well. I mean, the athleticism is something that they're looking at. You asked about analytics, and I think they're a team that's trying to be even more analytical than they have been in the past, because I think that a lot of the guys they've brought in specialize in that. And I think for a long time this team maybe wasn't so much headed that route. Now they have embraced that fully. Are they completely there where they have where they can really put that stamp on the team? Maybe they're still working their way toward it, but they've made strides in that sense. But they're identifying guys, that like I said before, athletes. They're different tool players that can hit well, run well, field well, that sort of thing. The part that the trend I'm seeing that maybe could be a little bit alarming is they're not really getting a lot of power hitters that you can, well, at least not that you can obviously identify as power hitters. There's a lot of guys that could develop power as they move forward, but they're not getting the guy that screams 40 home run hitter. Like, there's no Stanton, there's no, there's no power guy like that, or at least not there yet. So that's the interesting part. As they keep identifying these guys, yeah, it's great to have the most athletic team out there, and they're going to make, in theory, you're going to have guys that you said, like they can climb the wall, they can make diving catches, etc. But you got to produce runs, and you got to have extra base hits. You can't just be, the small ball team either. So that's going to be interesting to see how many of these guys develop into a little more of that, or how many guys they continue to acquire that can bring that element that's pretty much on this team now. I mean, you can't really point to anybody and really confidently, with 100% say that they're that. So, that's something necessary that to me, that's the closest thing I can say that to the identity of what I've seen so far, the type of player that they've been scouting and they've been, trying to sign and draft.
Follow his work for sure. Check him out on The Athletic Miami. We highly recommend the subscription. We'll be back with more episodes later this week. We probably are going to do a little Canes this week on the podcast, and obviously transition into Wade weekend here as we go later in the week.
Thank you for listening to the Fire Ringer podcast. Thank you so much.